Okay, so here we are with the Sony A80L. This is the 55-inch variant, and this is Sony's answer to competing with things like LG OLED Evo and MLA. They are going the route of the technology that they've been sticking to, which is the XR cognitive processor with XR OLED Contrast Pro, XR Triluminous Pro, and Google TV. Now, is this going to be enough to kind of offset the market? Well, that's what we're here to find out. So here we have the power cable. It's detachable, so that's really good for those who don't want to be stuck with a cord in the television. And again, if something happens where you have a pet that chews through the wires, you don't lose your whole TV. You can just replace this. So I still really like that it's detachable. Very different from LG OLEDs. This is their remote, so pretty bland, but you can kind of see it up close to see all the, I guess, luxury, let's call it that, right? But all jokes aside, it's pretty much what we saw last year. You know, there's like a wrench this year that's kind of different, but otherwise, it's very different. You got the Bravia Core button, but really, it's all the same. Now, for my anime fans, it is nice to see that there is a Crunchyroll button on the remote. As we know, Sony recently acquired Crunchyroll, so it is nice to see that, because, come on, who doesn't like anime? Now, we've got the stands, the feet. It's very, very what we've seen from Sony before with these very long kind of feet. It's typical Sony. So we're going to put this together and see what it is. As far as the design goes, it's this grid-style backing that we've seen from Sony in years prior. And again, it works, but it is a bit dated at this point. It does feel like I'm buying a TV that's at least 3 years old now, just because I've seen this design before. So I guess this is Sony's way of answering the challenge of LG OLED Evo and really breaking the mold in terms of design, but it just feels like something that's a bit too familiar in my personal opinion. Now, the nice thing about Sony is that with these feet, you still do have the ability to just slide them in like so, and no screws required. I think this is still Sony's strongest suit as far as putting the stand together. Now, as you see, I did twist it so it is a bit more turned in, so it's not as wide of a profile, so it can fit a smaller media console. If you didn't want that and you wanted it to be the other way, you could just turn it around and do something similar to that. Or actually, I believe you do have to actually go into here, and then you have to start taking apart the screw and setting the foot arrangements a little differently if you wanted to do that. But again, for all intents and purposes, I'm just going to set it like this. It's pretty easy, but the only time you ever really need to touch the screws is if you're trying to rearrange the position for maybe a sound bar or something else like that. But again, it's good that you have stand options. Then all we really do is just take our detachable cable, find where the power outlet is, plug it in, and then we're good to go to start powering on the TV. Honestly speaking, this is probably one of my favorite parts of removing plastic of any kind from a product. It's when we get to things like this and you see like the new A80L for 2023, you just go up to the top and you start peeling away at it. It's got its own little rewarding feel to it. I absolutely love doing this. It's so much fun. Now, in terms of reflections, it handles okay, but it is semi-gloss. You can see a bit much. Again, you could probably see this highlight here on the side. Again, you're not gonna get a whole lot in terms of it being perfectly diffused. Something like the S95B definitely handles reflections a lot better than what we have on the A80L. But again, it will really depend on you personally. If you don't have a lot of windows, then maybe it won't be that big of a deal. So now we're gonna turn the TV on for the very first time with our remote here. Okay, let's see what we've got. I'm just getting an idea of how this TV looks. Okay, so we're gonna go to English, and we're gonna select our country, which is the United States. And then it's going to ask you if you want to do the Google TV setup or if you want to do the basic setup. And so I'll do the basic setup for the TV. Now they're going to ask you to select your Wi-Fi. And so you put in all your Wi-Fi information. So now once it's connected to the Wi-Fi, then you kind of wait for this little spindle wheel. It can take a little bit, so you got to be patient with it. Though if I'm being honest, I do wish it was a bit more snappy instead of like taking as long as this is taking. This is one of the longer startups I have seen. Now, you do have the forced Google Terms of Service returning this year. It's kind of like an annual tradition at this point with Sony. This just basically tells you that, your device may or may not receive and install updates from Google or the manufacturer. So just make sure your Wi-Fi has auto updates off, like you go, I'll show you how to do that later on, but just make sure auto updates are off really. Now, you don't really have a choice in any of these terms of service. It is nice that they limited it from like being 3 paragraphs long to like 2, I guess, lucky us, right? But I mean, it still is strong arming, so you don't have a choice. So all you have to do is just hit accept if you want to use a TV, or box it up and return it. Now, as far as the Google service, I mean, I'm just gonna turn off the location where it's collecting all this data and where they want all this help. Yeah, we're not doing any of that. We're gonna hit accept, and then it's gonna take us through the mountain that we've seen for many years at this point. I do wish they would get a different video loop, but that's neither here nor there, I suppose. We can't expect too much, at least as far as like the newness of it all. Now, start your Bravia experience. So we're gonna hit start, and it's going to walk us through the Bravia policy. They love policies, just so you understand all the rules and agreements. I'm just gonna proceed without checking anything. Voice recognition stuff. It tells you about the switch on the device here. I'm gonna turn off power saving so that our TV's not overly dim. I'm going to go ahead and skip the cable setup and all that. I'm going to connect later to the PlayStation 5 and things like that. So we're just gonna move on from there. And I have it tabletop as my stand position, and we'll let it do the acoustic audio calibration. We'll allow it to have access to our microphone and hit start. Audio actually sounds pretty good. There's probably a silver lining there. Maybe the speakers have a improved subwoofer this year, so fingers crossed there, because that did have a little bit more of a bassy kick than what I usually hear, which is usually more tinny. So then we're going to go ahead and hit skip, and it's talking about more my Bravia stuff, and no thanks, I'll register later. Apple AirPlay HomeKit type stuff, checking for updates now, and I'm not going to enable, what is it, Samba TV? Yeah, we're just gonna go ahead and just save and exit without accepting any of that stuff. And accessibility features, just hit OK, and there we go. Now the setup is complete. Now we're gonna set it up for retail so that we get the store demo, and I'm gonna come back when the store demo starts. Okay, so this is what we have for the Sony A80L so far. Now the red does look pretty decent from what I saw from that. Now keep in mind, this is very edited video footage to make Sony televisions look really good. So we do have to make sure that it's gonna live up to it in normal usage, but so far, so good. The colors look pretty decent considering this is vivid mode. This isn't even like the most accurate mode, but I am noticing that there is a little bit more in the way of blood orange reds and not pure red. So that is something I am going to have to stress test. Now, the relevancy of this is because that's something that typically LG OLED has been struggling with for a very long time, and we're seeing that kind of now lean more towards Sony on this model. Now, the sharpness is nice and everything. The foliage looks really clear, very detailed, so I don't have any complaints there. Motion is a bit of a problem. I still notice that it's a bit choppy, so we're gonna have to really see how motion holds up and things like that, per the usual. But that's all gonna happen in later videos. But so far as a first impression, I honestly will say it looks kind of exactly what I've seen in years prior from Sony. I'm not really seeing anything that's like standout-ish, right? Like, whoa, that's like way different or way better. I think a lot of that stuff, if there, will come once we start really doing an analysis and getting in there, diving deep and seeing what this bad boy's all about.